not ready yet. I don't know what I did.
Okay. As soon as we get the bat signal from the chat room here that we are all set. It's live. Gordon McLeod says, Roger.
Oh, wait. That's a different Roger.
That's
sorry.
Yeah.
See, I can't use that one. It's like,
Roger.
Okay, everyone says we're 5 starting. I'm telling the Discord. Okay, and Flying Out says, go, go, go. Are you all ready?
Oh, no. Not at all.
Justin says no. Well, I don't care. We're going anyway. Okay, I don't need to be in Twitter. There we go. Don't need to be in there. Okay. All right, everyone. We're going to do it. This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 727, recorded on Wednesday, June 26th, 2019. It's the Daily Animal News Show. Today we will fill your head with feet, dung beetles, and Neanderthals. But first...
Disclaimer. No matter what, be positive. Yes, life isn't always a bowl of cherries. But so what? You could have a bowl of cherries right now if you wanted it. But you don't. And why? Because of the pits. Even a bowl of cherries has a downside. So be positive, because tomorrow you might die suddenly and unexpectedly. And if you have not been positive, those around you will only say that you didn't really like it here anyway. So be positive, because even when things are bad, they could be much worse. So be positive, because the universe doesn't actually care if you are not happy. So be positive, because it doesn't matter if you are not. So you might as well just look at the bright side. After all, there are things to look forward to. And a great number of those things are about to come your way here on This Week in Science. Coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind I can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, Blair and Roger.
Good science to you too, Justin and Roger as well. Welcome everyone to this week's episode of This Week in Science. Today we have a great show ahead. Dr. Kiki is sadly not with us tonight. She is taking the night off, much deserved, to celebrate her 15th wedding anniversary. So real quick, congratulations, Kiki, 15 years, yay. And in her place, we are lucky to be joined tonight by Roger Chang from the Daily Tech News Show. Welcome, Roger.
hello, all. Thank you for having me. I'm glad I could be part of the show.
Yeah, have fun. Do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah,
Tell us
so
where you're
just
from
very quickly, I am the producer for the Daily Tech News Show at dailytechnewsshow.com. But I am a veteran of cable TV. I worked at ZDTV, then became Tech TV for 6 years. Did contract work for a couple of networks, including the independent IFC, Independent Film Channel. Worked at CNET for a couple of years, Ziff Davis for a couple more years, and then 6 years at Discovery Digital Networks. And here I am.
Yeah, so you've got quite a bit of expertise, especially on the other side of the camera as well. So it's pretty cool. But are you excited to talk about some science news with us today?
Yes, it's
nice
kind of
chat.
neat to be able to do that and not have people scratch their heads when I open my mouth.
Yeah. Absolutely. So we are going to jump right into the show. What are we going to talk about this week? Well, I have a big, fat, juicy animal corner this week. So I have stories about the evolution of mammals, mosquitoes, dung beetles, and frustrated fish. Justin, what do you have?
Well, I've got some Neanderthal news, some really big birds, and some genomic dark matters to discuss.
Very nice. And Roger, what did you bring?
I have the wonderful story of why perhaps running barefoot is a better option for you than having running shoes, and why automation, well, more news about automation, the good, the bad, and maybe the ugly. I don't know.
Yes, absolutely. Those robots going to take all our jobs. Well, as we jump into the show, I wanted to remind everyone that you can subscribe to TWIS as a podcast in iTunes, on Google Play, any podcast portal you know of, Stitcher, Spreaker, Spotify, Pandora, TuneIn, etc., etc. You can also find us on YouTube and Facebook. You can just search for This Week in Science and pretty much find us pretty much anywhere, or you can just go to TWIS.org. Now let's jump right into the science news. What big story did you bring for us, Justin?
So there are a great many clever accomplishments current humans are responsible for. We have invented a great many things. It's one of our prideful moments when we look back and look at all the wonderful, crazy inventions that we've come up with. Our list of clever things does have a small section there towards the beginning where things have been getting crossed off. Stone tools. Homo erectus had those, and maybe even a predecessor of Homo erectus. Ancient cave art, those magnificent paintings in Spain and France. It turns out those were Neanderthals painting those. Fires? Yeah, fire. The invention of fire. Neanderthals had fire, and maybe that was pre-existing, even Neanderthals. But now another basic clever invention thing has been found.
What do we have left?
I know we got like the smartphone, and we're gonna find out now. Actually, that was also Neanderthals had that. No, it's not quite there yet. But it's glue. The use of resins from trees to attach spearheads and the like. This is archaeologists working in 2 Italian caves have discovered some of the earliest known examples of using an adhesive on stone tools. This is a technological advance that was called hafting. And hafting was previously thought to have been something that current modern humans had come up with. New study, which is Colorado University Boulder's Palo Villa, shows Neanderthals living in Europe from about 55 to 40,000 years ago traveled away from their caves to collect resin from pine trees. They then used the sticky substance to glue stone tools to handles made out of wood or bone, which is just adding to a growing body of evidence suggesting that Neanderthals were maybe more clever, not just than we thought, but more clever than the current modern humans of their time. Quotey voice, CU Museum Natural History, Vila saying, "We continue to find evidence that Neanderthals were not inferior primitives, but were quite capable of doing things that have traditionally only been attributed to modern humans." That insight, she adds, came from a chance discovery from Grotto del Fossolone, Grotto del Sant'Ignazio, a pair of caves near the beaches of what is now Italy's west coast. Those caves were home to Neanderthals who lived in Europe during the Middle Paleolithic period, thousands of years before the current modern humans had arrived on the continent. They uncovered more than 1,000 stone tools from the 2 different sites, including ones that they put through some tests and found the sticky, strange residue, which they then identified as resin from the local pine trees. And in one case, that resin had also been mixed with beeswax. So these were, they were looking for anything sticky that they could find, I guess.
That's great. That takes it an extra step further to me, because I think about just sap, right? Like you get a little sap on your car. That is so hard to get off of your car. It's just the stickiest, most permanent thing I can imagine in nature is that little dollop of sap on your windshield. But to actually mix it with other substances to make something to be used takes it a whole nother level.
And I think it may not be realized, but the use of adhesive is a huge advantage, right? Like typically when early man and perhaps hominids attached shards, whether it's flint or whatever, to a bone or stick to make a weapon or a hunting implement. That takes time, but also takes a certain level of skill, right? There's a little less when you can just say, hey, glue this to this, hold it there for 5 minutes, or until this guy stops, or this guy comes by and says you can let go. But it also makes the tool lighter, right? It's why we use why adhesives are such a big deal when it came to manufacturing, because every bolt, every rivet you add to like a car or a plane adds weight, something that you don't necessarily want if you want to achieve efficiency or lightweightness. And you know what? If you could shave a few pounds, you could carry a few more arrows, or maybe you could carry a few more of these weapons or implements with you along for a hunt or whatever they needed them for.
And you lose less tools. If you have it attached, you get to, and you can strike multiple times, because these weren't projectile hunters. These were hunters who got, you had to stick the sharp thing that you were holding into the thing you wanted to kill and then hold on. Otherwise, it could run off with your spear. You needed, they were right up and personal with their prey.
Yeah. And it's a very fascinating bit of, intelligence that you need to understand why things, maybe not exactly why things stick together, but certain substances allow you to accomplish a certain task. And then mixing beeswax, perhaps something like, oh, I got beeswax when I was getting, on my hand while I was collecting all this honey, or, some other, fictional event that I'm making up right now. But like, they got the beeswax. I mean, that takes a level of intelligence that, my daughter wouldn't figure that out until she maybe hits another year.
Yeah, and it was processed too. So there was also it was heated. They would build fires and then create the pitch, because they had to boil it down to a really sticky, thick substance. It wasn't just taken from a tree or the bees. Like, they had to actually refine it with an extra few steps, including technology of fire, to get it to the right thing. And it had to collect quite a bit of it to get enough pitch to hold on something like an axe to a handle. So we have a manufacturing process all the way from the stone tool to the handle to the adhesive, which was far more advanced than anything the current modern humans of the day were doing. What it's more and more, the stories I'm getting from this says that we current modern humans, more than anything, are just really good adapters. When we see something else, we don't necessarily have to invent it all. We just see somebody else doing it, go, yeah, that made sense. I can do that too.
Sometimes that's all you need.
Right, yeah.
The music industry, if it has taught us anything, sometimes you just need to
Sampling.
to borrow a pinch, and then you got yourself a hint.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of kind of underestimated past groups of life, I have a story about mammals in the Jurassic and Cretaceous period. So in the Jurassic and Cretaceous period, we think about who roaming the planet and ruling all. It's the dinosaurs, right? And so the historic understanding about what mammals were up to during the Age of Dinosaurs is this idea that they're these tiny little things. They're shrew-like, they're mouse-like. They're not up to much. They're kind of just biding their time. And they didn't really evolve to these diverse diets, behaviors, shapes, sizes until after the dinosaurs died off, after the KT or KPG mass extinction about 66 million years ago, until the space was freed. These niches were freed up for the mammals. But a new piece of research, this was an article published in Trends in Ecology and Evolution, looking at the fossil record. This is from University of Washington. Looked at exactly what the fossil record tells us mammals were actually up to during that time. So the view of mammaliforms does not stand up to what we and others have found recently in the fossil record, says David Grossnickel, the postdoctoral researcher from University of Washington. So mammals and their relatives actually went through, according to the fossil record, 3 significant ecological radiations in their history. So in evolutionary biology, we talk about radiation. That's when a niche is freed or something happens where suddenly animals evolve kind of with reckless abandon. Nature's just trying all the different possibilities to fill every little empty niche. So for example, when you think about animals, when you think about vertebrates first going up onto land, all you had up there was plants and invertebrates. And so all of a sudden these vertebrates go onto land and they're just trying everything. And eventually things like modern day amphibians, those sorts of things started to show up and really succeed, right? And so radiation is when basically all these different mutations are being tried out. Whatever wins, whatever is fittest, whatever reproduces most gets to continue on. So that's these radiations. So in these 3 actual radiations that was discussed in this review, they diversified from insect-chomping rodent-like ancestors that we think about from the Age of Dinosaurs, and they went into a bunch of different ecological niches. So new species, for example, could climb, glide, burrow, ate more specialized diet of meat, leaves, shellfish, all these extra things when we thought all these buddies were just kind of like hanging out underground, nice and small, nice and simple. So these 2 of the 3 actually occurred during Jurassic and Cretaceous periods, which is when we think of as the time of dinosaurs. So the oldest mammaliform ecological radiation ran from 190 to 163 million years ago. This was early to mid-Jurassic, and this was when Pangea was first breaking up, and it involved the first true mammals and their closest relatives. So there was a pretty big radiation then. The second was around 90 million years ago in the late Cretaceous, after flowering plants evolved, and ended at the KPG, or the KT mass extinction, which was 66 million years ago. Then the Paleocene-Eocene radiation was 66 million years ago, right after the mass extinction, and ended about 34 million years ago, which was the establishment of major lineages of placental and marsupial mammals. So most likely that's why we assume we're very like current centric in a lot of our history that we write, even when we're thinking about millions and millions of years ago. So if we think about modern day mammals, most of them came from this 3rd radiation. Yeah. And so I think it's very easy for us to assume that everything before that was just kind of waiting to be current mammals. But it turns out that is not the case. So that group was the one that made for marsupials, placental mammals, kangaroos, zebras, blue whales, humans, all the mammals we see today. But there's all this other stuff that happened before that. There's this distorted view of history. You're forgetting about these other groups of mammals that diversified millions of years before that. So go ahead.
So what's also very interesting about this diversification that you're talking about is this is after Pangea is breaking up. This is after the polar ice caps are now forming. So we now have, because at the time of the Jurassic, we had swampy dinosaurs at the poles. There were alligators in Montana. What's interesting about this radiation is that it didn't need the dinosaurs to be extinct for it to happen. These mammals would have evolved in cooler climates that the dinosaurs would have been retreating from. We would have had all the room that we needed to diversify and have mammals living alongside dinosaurs to today, if not for the extinction event.
Well, if you think about it, we have hippos and crocodiles living in the same rivers. Yeah. That's not that far off, right?
Absolutely. So there is outside of this horrible meteorite thing, asteroid, whatever, striking and causing this mass extinction, there's no reason we couldn't have dinosaurs and man walking side by side today. It didn't require the dinosaurs being removed from the planet to give the niche for mammals. That was coming anyway.
I would put some of the if I could say blame on popular culture, because oftentimes, whether it was wrongly assuming that cavemen and dinosaurs lived together, cheek and jowl, or something like Jurassic Park, where their dinosaurs are the centerpiece of the movie. I mean, it's kind of the whole point. but at the expense of like, well, that was all there was. There wasn't any other life forms during or around that period of time, and there was a huge.
How disappointing that you go to the Jurassic Park and it's all the mammals.
Yeah.
You're like, wow, this is not what I was expecting.
Yeah.
You know,
they were there too.
there's I mean, even within dinosaurs, I mean, there's hundreds of millions of years of evolution. You know, there are all these different life forms that sprung out of it because of the climate and the higher density of oxygen in the air. You know, they developed into such a huge range of different shapes and sizes. It would have been kind of cool to see if not for an extinction event, what it would look like. Although I'm sure they would have probably shrunk a little bit due to a colder climate, thinner atmosphere for some of the larger invertebrates.
And there's going to be there's something that ties into a little bit to a story that you're going to be talking about later. One of the theories of human intelligence comes from running around on our bare feet that were not initially maybe designed for walking, and the micro pulsing of blood to the brain from all of this running from these bloody bags of feet, right? As having
bad visual. Thank you.
Right. Having forced more blood to the brain from all of the running we did over millions of years as a bipedal creature, which is sort of a rarity to have fleshy feet and be bipedal. And the dinosaur with the largest brain pre-extinction and considered to be the most intelligent was sort of like a velociraptor looking thing, and was bipedal and was starting to actually articulate a little bit more upright at the point of the extinction. We're living in a world that could have had two sentient beings, both bipedal, with the Pangea and the climate change, allowing the mammals to go off and do their thing, and allowing the trajectory of the dinosaurs to follow. We could have two sentient species on this planet.
Or you could have ended up with chickens, which is what happened. So you could also just take a step back and recognize that modern birds, dinosaurs, not that different. So regardless, we kind of underestimated the mammals this whole time through the Jurassic and Cretaceous period. New fossils, more complete fossils are helping us recognize that they are much more diverse than we thought at those times. So it's time to rewrite the history books again. I feel like I say this every week. Rewrite those, biology books. I said history books. That's funny. All right. So moving right along, Roger, what did you bring?
So this story caught my eye. I got it from the New Scientist site. So the headline is "Barefoot walkers have tough feet but sense the ground just as well." And in summary, it's essentially a story of a biologist, evolutionary biologist, Daniel Lieberman from Harvard University. He took up barefoot running about a decade ago when he started studying this whole idea of just running without shoes. So, maybe socks, but you're not wearing tennis shoes, you're not wearing running shoes, not wearing any kind of shoes.
My arches.
It's interesting. His 2010 findings helped fuel kind of the craze about barefoot running, and oftentimes in new marathons there would be occasionally one or two or a handful of runners exclusively, not exclusively, but predominantly from like Kenya or other nations that produced very renowned marathon runners, and they would run barefoot. People, well, you're running barefoot, it's going to hurt, it's going to be bad for you, and the rest. But he noticed in his own personal experience that a lot of the pains that he was getting from his joints when he was running with athletic shoes disappeared or slowly diminished when he started running barefoot. And he wanted to kind of figure out what was going on, and he noticed that the calluses on the soles of his feet got thicker. But even as it got thicker, his sensitivity to the ground, his ability to sense the surface that he was running on, did not diminish. And he started looking at this, and what he hypothesized is that in many cases, running barefoot would actually reduce injury, because one of the facets of modern athletic shoes is you kind of have a sole that is designed to absorb or eliminate the shock that you get when you run. And the other byproduct is that as you run with shoes, people tend to land on their heel instead of the ball of their feet, which is kind of where you want to when you run. And so your foot can kind of flatten out and take some off, take some of the stress out. And it's what's so fascinating is that it is, just having the ability to kind of sense the ground that you're running on is so important. In fact, he's thinking about looking at elderly individuals who often have difficulty walking, and some of that could be due to the fact that they can't feel the ground beneath them because they're wearing shoes. And as you get older, your sensitivity, your nerve endings aren't as sensitive as they were like in your 30s or 20s. But it's kind of cool, and it's something near and dear to me because as I get older and I'm lifting my kids and I'm running around all the time, my feet begin to hurt.
So I mean, it's one of these things we just take for granted. You put shoes on when you go walking, and this is like normal to all of us just about now. Millions of years throughout ancestors and evolution, humans traveled the planet without shoes. It'd be like, okay, if you're going to eat something, you now need to put this thing in your mouth before you eat anything and hold it here while you eat. Like, it's like, it does seem like a crazy thing that somehow we just added to being on the planet that didn't necessarily need to be there.
And it's fascinating because there are so many different styles of footwear. I mean, whether it's dress shoes, athletic shoes, lounge shoes, moccasins, and it fascinates me that there's so much money invested in these things that oftentimes people just kind of like assume, yeah, well, they made it, I can wear it on my feet, so I guess I should go on it without really thinking about the implications. Because if you think about it, you spend most of your day, or at least your waking hour, on your feet in some fashion, right? Whether it's walking to work, or you're standing in a meeting, or you're getting your lunch. I mean, having good posture is crucial to maintaining your health. And at the bottom of it, no pun intended, is your feet. And it's kind of one of those things that you used to hear about, like, it's better if you run barefoot. And it's led to at least Lieberman considering maybe he wants to essentially further the test to see if you can get through a thin-soled shoe can offer some of the benefits of, say, like, not being able to scrape your feet on walking on a hot, pavement, but at the same time giving you enough sensation or tactile feel that you can feel and you can get your balance. I'm not sure if you've heard of tabby socks. Have you seen those? They're like socks that are designed for your big toe in one little holder, and then the rest of it in separate, so you can wear sandals with socks.
So they make. I thought you were going to talk about Five Fingers, those funny shoes with toes.
Well, those as well. But tabby boots were quite popular in Japan for the last half of the 20th century, because for the workers who used them, who went to work every day, whether they were working at the fish docks or they were working in a factory, they could feel the ground. It had a rubber sole. It looked the same way, but it was very flexible, and it was designed to conform to the foot, which is something kind of opposite to the way shoes work now, where your foot sort of conforms to the shoe, especially if you have to wear dress shoes, which are very painful for me. High heels, another no.
The worst.
I hate wearing those. So this is interesting too, because I recall having grown up slightly country, having calluses on the feet, being able to go outside and run around in dirt and rock, and not having it be a big deal. And now, like, I can't walk to pick up a newspaper or take the trash out without putting my shoes on. My feet are just fragile poodle bumblebees of, like, not able to withstand anything environmental.
Okay, now as the native San Franciscan, let me say, I have never walked outside of my home or backyard without wearing shoes because of broken glass,
Oh,
cigarette butts,
Yeah.
various types of poop, hot pavement. There's lots of things as a city dweller that I'm trying to avoid. So my question is, what are these tracks? Where are they running where they can run barefoot and not get in trouble?
Oftentimes they run cross country.
Oh,
So
wow.
it'll be on trails. Like when people think running, they think of like, a decathlon or a marathon and Olympic. And if you actually run on those, the surfaces are pretty cool because they're actually not they're kind of spongy, right? They're not just absolutely hard and immutable. You can run and they sort of bounce. It's awesome if you ever get a chance to do it. But oftentimes they run cross country, they run across trails, and although it might look a little painful, they're actually quite nice, like grass between your toes without the dog poop. I mean, it's weird that you bring that up because a lot of the social conditioning is if you're barefoot, you're poor, you're going to get something.
That's true,
and,
too.
no shoes, no shirt, no service kind of thing. So you're not hopping into McDonald's to get your high calorie breakfast burrito. So, I mean, honestly, my one sentence boils this whole thing down to be take care of your feet because they take care of you.
Yeah, that is very true. Absolutely. All right, Justin, do you know what time it is? Oh, if you just tuned in, you're listening to This Week in Science. Tonight we are joined with Justin Jackson. We are joined with Roger from the Daily Tech News Show, and yours truly, Blair Bazdarich. What time is it, Justin?
Well, when you first asked, I was going to say it was time to say that. But now that you're asking, I would say it's time for
See, you're helping
Blair's
me take care of it.
Animal Corner.
There we
with
go.
Blair.
She loves our creatures, great and small. My pet, millipede, no pet at all. You want to hear about animals? She's your girl. Except for giant pandas and squirrels. And
What you got, Blair?
I have, speaking of the poop on the streets, I have dung beetles to talk to you about today. So I want to start by referencing a study actually done related to the one that I'm about to talk about, that we talked about on the show a long time ago. So I'm going to talk about what we talked about that one time when we talked about it. It was about how dung beetles navigate by the Milky Way and polarized moonlight while rolling their dung balls in a straight line during the night.
What could be more romantic than rolling a dung ball in the moonlight?
Yes. So a new study looked at how dung beetles move when the sun is too high or too low to provide directional information. This is an international research team from Sweden and South Africa, and they wanted to look at what happens when the sun is directly above, higher than 75 degrees above the horizon in the middle of the day, or when it is so low that it provides very little information on which way you are going. Also, when it's cloudy, dung beetles don't know where the sun is, so that is a problem. They looked out in the field and in the laboratory using fans. They created wind. They could select the wind direction, which way the wind was blowing in each test. They changed the sun's position in the sky using a mirror in their laboratory. When the sun is at a low or medium elevation in the sky, the dung beetles change direction by 180 degrees if the sun's position is changed by 180 degrees. So they are definitely using the sun to help identify which way to go with their nice ball of dung. However, they were not affected when researchers changed the wind direction by 180 degrees when the sun was at these elevations, low or medium. But when the sun was highest, the situation was reversed. The wind showed the way. Insects did not respond to a change in sun location, but they did respond to a change in wind direction. Yeah, so they use their antennae to register wind direction. And so they can use these different kind of vector information pieces to find their way through their habitat with their pile of dung. Yeah, so this is the first study showing an animal using their biological compass where they integrate different directional sensors, in this case, wind and sun, in a flexible way. This enables the highest possible precision at all times, says Marie Dack, professor of sensory biology at Lund University, and she was the lead researcher.
Yeah. And we call it a ball of dung.
Mhm.
But of course, the beetle refers to it as their stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and it also keeps their tootsies cool when it's too hot on the ground, which I absolutely love. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like their own version of shoes.
Yeah.
So this is their proof that these teeny tiny brains in these dung beetles have dynamic principles that adapt to conditions that at any given moment. And so this combined with what they know about the Milky Way and polarized moonlight for them to find their way means that there's a lot still to learn about these quote unquote small brained animals and how they handle large amounts of information to make decisions. Their next plan is to go on to study whether they can also use the wind at night. I'm guessing yes. Another aspect they're curious about is what guides them when there is no wind and it's cloudy, which is a great question. So they say this has implications for robot development and artificial intelligence because it's incorporating a bunch of different pieces of stimuli from the outside world to kind of navigate. But I think more than anything, it's just a reminder that we're not that special. This is what I always end up talking about in the animal corner, right? Like we assume all these animals are stupid because we don't know how to test their intelligence. We think that we are these ultra smart animals that can process all of this special information with our very large brains with lots and lots of folds. But in reality, animals have a pretty hard life and they have a lot of things that they need to figure out in a given day to not die. And in order to do that, they have to be able to process a whole lot of information at once. And I am in no way surprised by this finding, but it's cool to know that they use the wind. Pretty neat.
Yeah, and you're making this correlation of animal intelligence between humans and a thing that makes its home in a giant ball of dung. But then again, like, what is a mortgage?
And yeah, I mean, Justin, some penguins make their dens out of century-old penguin poop piles. So.
And there's a island in Denmark that is made up almost entirely of
See, there you go. Frozen poop.
They are just recycling the gifts that the world gave them. I mean,
yeah.
Without them, I'll be honest, you're probably a lot more turds just floating around for you to step in your bare foot.
Detritivores are, in many ways, my favorite animals on the planet because if they weren't eating poop, there'd be a lot more of it. So thanks, detritivores and scavengers and all the animals that eat things that we don't want to eat. Very important work.
But more to the case with the story, we can learn a lot from the way they operate. We used to, we still do. We research birds to find out how they find direction, whether they have an internal magnetic compass, dolphins, whales, other migratory animals. Because it's important to understand, not just for the benefit of the animals, for ecological preservation, but we want to build intelligent systems that do this. Back in the day before GPS, a lot of the automated flight systems we had relied on radar, and the Air Force before then relied on something called stellar navigation, which sounds super awesome because it sounds like it's from sci-fi. And essentially, it was a system that looked at the stars to figure out where it was. It was very much of I'm using a sextant, but it's in a computer, and the plane is sort of kind of figuring where it's at. It's much better now, believe me. But it's all these things have been around for millions of years, evolved through trial and error. I'm sure the dung beetles that didn't have this ability were quickly eaten up or couldn't get their ball of dung where they needed it.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because all this stuff, we want to do it in a machine. We want to be able to take, a bottlenose dolphin's head and replicate everything it could do with echolocation. So we could, go into the sea and figure out, look at things. It's just awesome. It's just really cool because, even these small creatures and, they're not they're not writing out a new season of Scandal or anything, but they're getting by in a very cool way.
Yeah, and if you can find that a dung beetle can do something that you thought you were going to have to model a dolphin brain for, that's actually a lot more achievable as someone designing AI, a simple neural network to a very complicated one.
Exactly.
So, yeah, absolutely. This is something that could be really helpful in finding neural network function for other AI. So.
And if you don't want to say dung beetle, you can say scarab beetle too.
Yeah,
it's a little more sophisticated and polite company.
I prefer dung beetle. So to an animal that people like even more than dung beetles, I have a story about mosquitoes.
Ooh.
Yes, it's a story that probably no one will enjoy, unfortunately. I have some bad news for you all.
Wait, there's worse news than the mosquitoes' natural activity?
Yeah. Agricultural pesticides are making some mosquitoes pesticide resistant.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yay!
I got eaten alive last year. I stopped wearing shorts for that reason. I live in Southern California.
Oh no, you poor thing. Go stay inside with the air conditioning. This is a study from Utah State University. They found that there were pesticide-resistant mosquitoes colonizing habitats that had reduced numbers of predators and competitors due to the pesticides used in that space. Extensive analysis of aquatic invertebrate communities within tropical bromeliads found that invertebrate biodiversity was reduced when exposed to pesticides. Makes sense. But the bromeliads from areas with pesticide use had higher densities of mosquitoes. Quote, our toxicity bioassay showed that W. ababala, which is the mosquito species, from agricultural areas had 10 times dimethoate tolerance, so that's the pesticide, compared to non-agricultural mosquitoes. Combining the toxicity experiments with field observations gave us a better understanding of possible mechanisms driving community patterns across landscapes. That's Jen Weatherhead, the main researcher. So they found that the mosquitoes were getting to be resistant to the pesticide. At the same time, the pesticide was destroying all of the other invertebrate life in that space, including their predator, the damselfly. So those two things together mean that the mosquito populations could explode in those areas treated by pesticides.
And
both in laboratories and in field experiments, this happened.
Yeah. And thank goodness, because we're talking about agricultural areas. We know now that mosquitoes are pollinators. If you've eliminated everything else, you have eliminated the thing that will do the pollination. And the fact that the pollinators, a major player in that category, is going to thrive now because they've become immune and their niche has opened up, means great things for plants and flowers in the future. Go mosquitoes.
Or you could just release a whole lot more damselflies who will eat mosquitoes in that space. And then, that won't be good for the plants. It'll reduce the amount of mosquitoes, but it also won't kill other invertebrates in the area that might also be pollinators. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
This is a clear example of the law of unintended consequences.
Yes,
right? It's
absolutely.
like, I really want to get rid of these bugs that might be eating my crops, and that's certainly a relevant complaint. But at the same time, I mean, it's like ladybugs; they eat the aphids. Like, you don't want to get rid of the ladybugs. You don't want to get rid of the bees because they pollinate everything.
Yeah.
But you got to be careful because when you hose everything down, that's one of the consequences. And it does suggest that perhaps we need to examine better ways of pest management other than just liberal use of chemicals.
So we're in the danger of running into, though, is with all the bee colony collapses and bees being essential. I mean, 80% of the bees in America come to California at some point to pollinate the ag land. If the bees aren't hardy enough, and we discover at some point the mosquitoes are tough enough to do the job, you're going to have mosquito hives. 80% of the nation's mosquito hives brought to California
No,
to
thank
pollinate the fields.
you.
I'm saying the fact that we can make food to feed the population will be more important industrial wise and famine prevention wise than the fact that everyone will need to not go outdoors anymore because mosquitoes will have the air.
You know, I think it's the male mosquito that actually pollinates, right? Because it's the female ones that bite you and blood suck you in the middle of the night.
The female ones do bite you. I don't actually know which one is the pollinator.
I think it's the male because the males don't blood suck. And I remember this, believe it or not, from a critique of the Gary Larson cartoon of where the mosquito's coming home and he says, I had a terrible day today. I had to, suck all these people and stuff. And someone's wrote, well, that's not correct. Male mosquito doesn't bite people. Eats pollinates flowers.
You're totally right. Male mosquitoes never bite, and the females need the protein in blood only to produce eggs. So the normal food of adult mosquitoes is actually nectar from plants.
To be fair, Gary Larson also often showed cavemen alongside dinosaurs and
that's true.
And claimed that cigarettes is what actually killed the dinosaurs.
Oh, yeah.
They all smoked.
Yeah.
Well, something smoked. But it's yes. No, it's again, it's I remember when everyone I remember seeing old films where DDT was liberally spread around families and children to get rid of those nasty mosquitoes. Little did we know that they would affect aviary reproduction.
Yep. As the same time point though, I think when kids were like kids would go to a science fair and dip their arms in mercury and watch as the liquid metal rolls right off. Yeah, it was fun times.
Oh my God. Well, anyway, on that note, for progress, we are going to progress into our break. Stay tuned for more This Week in Science. We're going to take a quick little break and we will be right back. Did you know that TWIS has merchandise you might enjoy? You can go to TWIS.org and buy some of our swag. We have a link on our website that goes directly to our Zazzle store. So at our Zazzle store, you will see all sorts of merchandise with the TWIS logo on it. You will also find some merchandise with some of my art from previous calendars that we've done. So you can go check out our Zazzle store, go to twist.org, click on the Zazzle link in the menu, and you can see all the different things we have. We have pillows and shirts, and we have wrapping paper and ties and mugs and all sorts of fun stuff. If you know about a particular image from a previous year that you really want on a particular type of item, you can go ahead and let me know. Send me an email, blairbaz@twist.org, and I will plop that right into the Zazzle store for you so you can wear your TWIS swag. Did you know that TWIS is supported by listeners like you? Your donations pay for our hosting, our bandwidth, contractors we need to hire, and fun things we try to do for the show. Not you, Justin. You support the show by being the show, so we appreciate you. But we also appreciate any amount that donations are provided in. $2, $5, $10, $100, anything that you can give.
$1,000 would be fine. Don't be bashful.
$1,000 would be great, but also we will take any amount. Those little donations and those little bits of support make this show possible. We accept donations in a couple of different ways. First, we have PayPal donation buttons all over our website. That's just a quick little single-time donation. You can also set up recurring donations. That's at www.twist.org. The second is that we actually have a Patreon account. So if we go to patreon.com/thisweekinscience, that's patreon.com/thisweekinscience. You can pledge money there. And Patreon is kind of like Kickstarter, but for media producers. So people that are making stuff regularly. And you can get stuff in return for your donation. We do shout outs. We can send you a sticker or a t-shirt. We can even send you an autographed original of my artwork, which I just sent out a couple recently.
And a message for a voicemail.
Yes,
One of
and
those,
you can have Justin or any other host. I don't know why they would pick anyone besides Justin, but you can have one of us record your voicemail greeting. So definitely Justin. But that's an awesome kickback that you can get from the Patreon as well. Whatever you can do to support us, go to the website, listen to the most recent episode, comment on the show, make a donation. If you can't afford a donation, don't worry about it. There's still lots that you can do to help us out and make the show bigger, better, stronger, last forever.
Wow.
You can help us out by getting more people to listen to and watch our show. Get more people listening to TWIS. Use your social networks for science. Use your social media. You just tell people in person. When you take somebody's phone with their permission, you can go ahead and download our latest episodes. I think you'd really like to hear that. Tell people to tune in to TWIS. If you listen to us on iTunes, you can also help by posting a review of TWIS and giving thumbs up to recent reviews that were helpful to you. So we don't have a review from 2008 as the top review in iTunes. Let's stay current. We thank you for your support no matter what you can do, even just being here with us now, live, or later in the future listening. We hear you. We could not do this without you. Thank you for being here with us.
Things you heard with more than intuition. The line of reason shows the way to go. No conclusion.
And we're back with more This Week in Science.
My phone didn't recognize my fingerprint, but now it's time for This Week in What Has Science Done for Me lately. So, Roger, we have been doing this segment on the show for almost 2 years now, maybe more than 2 years. We did it actually, I think around early 2017. We started this when science was maybe not getting as much positive energy as we thought it deserved. And so now every week we ask somebody to send in a story of what science has done for them lately to make sure we are giving science our props every single week, recognizing how important science is to our lives for fun, for health, for everything. So now I'm going to go ahead and put you on the spot and ask you, Roger, what has science done for you lately?
Oh, this really is a spot.
It could be big, it could be small, it could be anything.
It's relatively small, but I would have to say the Impossible Burger and Beyond Meat.
Oh.
Now, one of the things as I've learned as I get older, my weight increases and my girth expands ever so slightly.
That gosh darn metabolism slowing down.
Yeah, I got to be aware of the red meats, things like that. But I am a fancier of the burger. So I was a little skeptical at these claims that they've created not only a taste and texture comparable to a burger, but something that I would, blindfolded, I wouldn't be able to tell. So back at CES at the beginning of this year, the Consumer Electronics trade show held in Las Vegas, we went to a little not exposition, but a little area that was dedicated to food innovation, and what they had on offer, the Impossible Burger, and I have to say, I was pretty impressed. I said to Tom Merritt, the host of the Daily Tech News Show, if these were offered like as normal patties, like every day that I could afford, I would totally eat these instead of burger, like actual red meat. And I have. Not very often, I will add, trying to cut down on eating in general. But no.
Yeah, I think they're actually more calories than the meat burger, but they are delicious.
But they are very delicious. And, I'm not going to say that, you're going to eat one and turn into, Atlas, Joe Atlas on the beach, impressing people with your biceps and six pack. But, this does bode well for the future of alternative meat products, but also sustainable food that you can have that people will, generally accept as a replacement. I think it's great. I don't think it's, this is the solution to, but it's
Right.
definitely points in the direction. I mean, they got the hemoglobin taste, that little blood metallic taste
Bleeds
that
a
you get
little
in
bit
meat.
on it.
Yeah, so
Yeah, well-
I myself have never had a hamburger in my whole life, but I recently had an Impossible Burger, and I did think it was very tasty, very hearty. It was a very interesting texture. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, so lab made food is a wonderful thing. It is that it is tasty because it's the future anyway.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
so
that's true.
my goodness, I'm glad it's tasty.
Well, and
Because
they say that even just cutting down one meal of meat a week is a huge impact on carbon. So even if you're not saying I'm going to go vegetarian, if you're just saying I'm going to replace one hamburger a week with an Impossible Burger, that actually makes a huge positive impact on our environment.
well, I mean, think about the amount of water and land you need to raise a cow.
Yeah.
Right. And even raising hogs, like if you're big into pork, and there's nothing wrong with pork, but those animals put out a lot of effluent, right? And to the point where in certain areas around the Carolinas where they have huge hog farm raising operations, the water is actually kind of gross for the fish in it.
Yeah.
And so, having something that you can eat and not feel and not have that impact would be great. And before then, I mean, people used to make fun of like the tofurkey and like the only cool thing that came out of NASA's space program was Tang and freeze dried ice cream, at least in the food sense. But I mean, it's kind of cool. I mean, when people think lab grown food, they think of weird, sci-fi movies where people are eating food out of a toothpaste tube or something ridiculous. And this does show that it's possible to have something that's tasty, for the most part nutritious, and definitely something that can be manageable for most people, I think.
Yeah, and the thing though is bioreactors, or however these become developed, are still going to use a lot of water and resources. There really actually is a one better solution, which is just going straight to insect eating.
Yeah, actually.
But people are still resistant.
It's
They will
all
go to the lab food before they'll eat crickets. I get it.
all marketing. The thing is, like, most bugs actually don't taste like much, right? If you've ever accidentally swallowed something,
Processed
like if
ones,
you ever
too.
been in
Yeah.
the fields, like I grew up, I didn't grow up, but I lived 7 years in the Central Valley. During
Yeah, we eat bugs every day.
Oh yeah, it's
On the
all over the place.
Yeah,
You open your mouth in the
unavoidable.
orchard, you're gonna get a fly or something.
Something's gonna go in there.
And that's not something I'm going to be proud of. Like, oh, I'm a fly eater, but for in Chinese culture, eating wok fried crickets isn't considered weird at all. It's a snack, and all it does is take a little bit of clever marketing. Like, for example, I had an idea of growing like Goliath scorpions as an alternative to lobster, and you just call them land lobsters, right? You just limit. I mean, really, if you think about it, they're just land lobsters. Sure, they're maybe a few generations
Lobster
removed.
minis?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, who wouldn't go for that?
Right, and they have that little bite, with the venom. Perfect. I mean, people go out of their way and pay hundreds of dollars to eat fugu, the poisonous puffer fish, because the meat is so delicate. But just a little bit of the liver,
yeah, oh my gosh,
that's part of the fun.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, amazing developments in food and meat replacements is a great What Has Science Done For You lately? Thank you so much for sharing. Remember, everyone, we need you to write in and let us know what science has done for you lately as listeners. What does it do for you every day? If it's been a while since you wrote, go ahead, write again, update us, give us something new. It could be small, it could be big. Leave us a message on our Facebook page, facebook.com/thisweekinscience, or you can email your submission to Dr. Kiki directly. And I just became Kiwi for a second. KikiFinch@gmail.com. Oh no, Kirsten@thisweekinscience.com. I'm reading old copy. We want to fill this segment of the show with something from our community every week. Let's keep going. We don't want this segment to die. Send us what science has done for you lately. Write us in. All right, Justin, tell me about bird bones.
So I'm gonna have to come back to the bird bone story because I'm having some technical difficulties.
Oh no.
And instead, I'm gonna give you geneticists exploring the heart of the human genome. Yeah. So there's this thing called centromeres. They're in the middle of centromeres. They're in the middle of our chromosomes. They're sort of in the anchor area that the fibers are pulling chromosomes apart when cells divide. They're kind of important to understanding what happens when cell division is taking place, going wrong or working naturally. The DNA of the centromeres contains a lot of repeating sequences, which apparently has given some scientists a difficult time in mapping the region reliably.
So, Justin, I'm just going to cut in real quick and let you know that we did talk about this last week.
Oh, you did?
Yes.
Oh, you
but
brought
you
in
you can give us a quick, Kiki brought it. You can bring us a quick review about it and just tell us kind of your thoughts since maybe we didn't talk about it the exact same way.
Basically, what I was going to say is this was done at UC Davis.
Yes.
Which is a pebbles throw away from me.
You could spit at it.
Yeah. If they need it sequenced reliably, they should just call.
Oh, yeah.
I
Absolutely.
can handle it. Yeah.
But so what happened with the centromeres real quick since you teased it in case somebody didn't hear it last week?
Case there's tons of Neanderthal in there.
So basically it's very heavily conserved over a very long amount of time was kind of what we talked about last time. So it was really interesting because it was kind of a time capsule in your genes from a very, very, very long time ago. And it included Neanderthals.
Yeah, like actually huge chunks of it. That was sort of the incredible thing that because we've talked a lot about how little Neanderthal DNA is actually there. There was in this study, at least, there was a considerable amount of Neanderthal DNA in a very conserved region. In fact, in chromosome 11, they were talking about haplogroups that divided 700,000 to 1 million years ago. Being present in this DNA. So this is some really ancient DNA. It's persisting in current humans. And UC Davis needs to give me a call. If you're having trouble with repeats, I got a program we can take out.
Well, and it's a good reminder about that whole braided stream thing, right? So you have these centromeres, which are these highly conserved parts of your chromosomes. And if they have these bits that are very, very, very old and very, very, very conserved, but they are from Neanderthals before when we thought we may have interbred with them, then that means that there are these big chunks of chromosomes that were given to us from the Neanderthals, which is
not necessarily because it can actually be common ancestors as well. So this is the whole braided stream thing. We have the same. It's when we're talking about divergence, that's about the divergent time too. So it could also be indicating that the common ancestor of Neanderthal and current modern humans is what's been conserved, and that we've both maintained this.
But then why would it show up specifically as Neanderthal DNA and distinct from ours if it was from a common ancestor?
Right. Exactly. So it must not persist in African populations. Is the only outcome, right? So then it is something that could still be an ancestor, but when you're talking about like things like haplogroups or things that are getting passed down, it could be that means it was a different ancestor than the ones that ultimately led to the Neanderthals, but still could be from the same ancestor.
I see. Interesting.
But I guess we already about this right. All right, I'll keep diving. My technology, I have the bird story I will bring in a few moments.
In a few moments. Okay, so in the meantime, Roger, do you want to tell me about how robots are stealing my job?
Yeah, so we covered this story from a very tech angle this earlier today on DTNS, but it's very interesting. So Oxford Economics. It's a firm that evaluates and produces reports on economies. Did a study, and they calculate roughly 20 million manufacturing jobs around the world could be replaced by robots, automation by 2013. However, that said, the amount of increased automation will also boost job creation and its economic growth. Now, here's the bad part. That's going to be applied unevenly, right? So not everyone will benefit from the largest of automation and improved productivity. So they figure out at least every 1.6 manufacturing jobs. Hey, Ellie. Let's say hello. All right, go to mommy and close the door behind you.
Will one of them be a bed tucking robot? Because
yes, I hope so. I hope so. I have to do this, Ellie. I need you to go. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
No.
All right,
This happens. It happens all the time on this show because everybody except for Blair has kids, but she's working on it,
Okay.
and they always get involved in the show at some point.
Hold on, let me do this. Go. You can grab
Sure.
All right. That was my daughter. She's very fond
Awesome.
of seeing what daddy's up to. But roughly 1.6 manufacturing jobs for every robot will be taken. Unfortunately, regions where people tend to be lower skilled, that means more manual types of work that require less education or less skill development, will tend to feel the impact more. In other words, more of those jobs will go. And the jobs that they could go to, things like truck driving, construction, maintenance and office, those jobs are next on the list of things to be automated. And so kind of the synopsis of this whole thing is we can see this coming down the pipe. We need to develop some policies that allow us to transition those people over, whether it's skill retraining, finding new jobs, or some kind of in between, where people just aren't left. I mean, because we've experienced something very similar with the Industrial Revolution. A lot of people from agricultural backgrounds moved into the factories, and that whole shift was not easy. You had riots, you had labor strikes, you've had labor business relations, you had all these things that happened. If anyone remembers the Grapes of Wrath as kind of foretelling of kind of that shift where agriculture became kind of a diminishing pool where people could work. And so
foreshadowing was a bird of prey eating a turtle. Was that the foreshadowing moment in that book? Something like
that. For the Grapes.
Isn't it Grapes of Wrath? It's like the classic example of a foreshadowing in literature. It was like this.
Possibly. I don't remember it because I read it 15 years ago.
Yeah, high school was a long time ago.
Okay.
Oh, high school. Geez, I would have to crank the time dial back even further, but I won't because I'm old. But it's a very fascinating look that automation is kind of a thing that's happening now. It's not happening across the board. It's not like you will be replaced by a robot. Jobs that will stay are ones that require human intuition, human judgment, creative aspects, something that you can't easily automate. So even things like certain levels of programming, computer programming will eventually be automated through machine learning. Right, stuff that requires. However, things like putting together plumbing or any kind of carpentry, those skills might still remain because there's a certain level of skill that can't necessarily be replaced.
So you said computer programming might get automated?
Certain types of
because I know they have a lot of programs where they take people like coal miners, for example, that are out of work, and they teach them how to code, and things like that sound very promising. But if there's going to be automation even in that field, there's some concerns.
Yeah, when people say coding, they imagine it's all very sophisticated and but a lot of it's back-end database stuff, which can be automated because there's a lot of stuff that is very typical about it. It's it's the more creative stuff, things like games or perhaps a video editing suite or something, or even larger databases that require a lot more complicated kind of comparative databases that need to do a little more, intelligent work. It's not that, it's not that all coding is smart or all coding is dumb. Like everything else, someone who's a carpenter isn't the same guy who just nails together two 2x4s, right? A master carpenter is doing more than just that.
Yeah.
And the important thing is also people skills aren't fungible, right? Just because you're really good at being a PhD doesn't mean you're going to make a very good computer, a computer developer or a coding developer. And vice versa, someone who's worked in the mines, you easily just can't transition them into another type of work just because.
So is there a canary in the code mine at this point? Is there something where we can see that this has already worked and humans were irrelevant to the coding of a thing? And it
they're starting, especially with machine language, and kind of developing models that. This is where it would happen. It's where you need to create something that doesn't exist yet, but you just can't repurpose an existing code base because it's either too large, unwieldy. For example, if you just needed to maybe create a database for, I don't know, you say you run a store that sells antiques and you need certain aspects of an antique database that you, for some reason, can't do in Visual Basic. Machine learning would be able to kind of like, okay, we'll do all this, or think of your taxes, filling out your taxes. You have software that does that. Machine learning can automate it to a point where they just keep asking you questions and it automatically fills it out for you. So we're at an in-between stage. We're at a transition stage, and a lot of what was being kind of reported on is that this is coming. It's not here yet. We should develop ways to kind of offset or mitigate the impact this would have on large populations of people.
Right.
I would think that the last thing that the automation AI would be trained to do would be to write automation, because you would think that the person
it wouldn't be
like, oh, I could teach the AI to automate on its own. And, oh, you know what? Then it wouldn't need me.
Yeah.
At the very least, that would be the thing where they would stop and say, no more.
Well, it wouldn't be automation, writing automation. It'd just be, like not all code, a code could be as simple as like every time I type my name, it shows up in my Twitter, my Facebook or whatever, like Hootsuite does all that all at once. It depends, and not, a lot of this stuff will not be directly affecting people on a day-to-day basis, but it will affect, for example, a lot of the jobs that they outsource, coding jobs that they outsource overseas tends to be a lot of the kind of more rote, more repetitive stuff that more skilled programmers generally don't want to do because it's not considered challenging in the same way that, hey, you're a world-renowned chef. Here, go work at this Mel's Diner and slap me up a couple of burgers and a grilled cheese sandwich. I mean, yeah, it's all cooking, but on a certain level, there's a difference in applied skill and creativity.
But can we agree, though, maybe that the goal is to automate every job?
Well, see, this is the thing. You can't automate every job, and that's what they're saying is like things that require human intuition, creativity, tend to be safer.
Like education, I feel pretty safe.
Education, teaching people is actually is one of those things that people think you can, just program and people will learn from a screen, and that's not
okay. But we were at the Santa Fe Institute, and one of the speakers there is developing AI to write movie scripts.
Right.
Based on the history of
I haven't seen that, but I think I've seen something very similar about writing like fiction or something. And it's very obvious, right? I'm sure at some point it's currently, but but then again, what is it doing? It's getting rid of the low-level jobs of TV writers who basically steal plots from other shows and they change the characters, and it's like you're no longer a cop, you're a PI. and you're no longer in LA, you're in Houston, and it's not a murder case, it's a bigamy case or something like that. And then, your whole thing is that you're allergic to peanuts. And it's like
perfect. Yes,
you
it's like
basically
a Mad Lib.
Yeah, exactly. That's what a lot of those things do, and it actually looks like
so
it.
formulaic.
It's funny.
So
it's very So
which the blockbusters, a lot of those are based on the personality of the celebrity that is the writer that did it, right? And so that's part of why people participate in certain creative endeavors, is because of the people behind it. I don't know if someday AI will be writing that stuff and then someone up front will pretend to take credit for it, but ultimately, I feel like that's part of the human experience that's important to mention here, is that people want to invest in people. There's a reason people use the checkout line with a human instead of the self-checkout line. It's because they feel more comfortable talking to a human.
And because I'm always buying alcohol, and you can't do that in a self.
That also.
And things like healthcare, right? You don't want to. I know there are companies in Japan developing robot nurses, but really, you don't want a robot nurse.
I might prefer
it's time for your bath, and you get these, even if it's soft, even if it's soft robotics, and they have a very gentle touch, it's kind of awkward, right?
I don't know. I'm still dirty here.
I just watched I Am Mother on Netflix, so I'm very. If you get a chance and you have Netflix, you should see it. But it covers a couple of those bases. It's very interesting.
Wow. Maybe we should all. Oh, go ahead.
But eventually, automation is it's not even outsourcing. It's not immigrant labor that's taking anybody's jobs. We've automated so much of the work that we used to do that no longer exists. And we got pushed with the idea was we were going to do service jobs and everything else. And then Amazon came along. It's like, well, I guess we're not all going to work.
Well, the thing is, it's the whole fallacy of there's a lump of labor. There's a fixed amount of jobs. And as we've gone through life, we've learned that people need different things over time, right? So things like, who would have thought that you could take your car out and become a pretend taxi, for a couple hours in the evening. Gig economy is part of it, but I think there will be different jobs that will be needed as a lot of these technologies develop. Like, not everyone needed a butter churner back in the day, and now you don't need it because you get everything. But it's not like a butter churner suddenly lost their job. And remember, the original computers were people, right? If you ever watch the movie Hidden Figures, when they're running all the numbers, that's who computers were.
Yeah,
and then we turned them into digital computers. Same thing, word processor. Back in the day, a word processor was a person who typed for you into a computer, and so that became something that got eliminated through software. Spell check, you had a dictionary. You don't need that. We put all those dictionary publishers out of business.
What was that? What's the Encyclopedia Britannica?
Yes,
they used that was a gig. Oh, you could be a professional encyclopedia
door-to-door salesman,
door-to-door everywhere in the world. Hey, you need this for your kids' education. Now they
just wait 10 years. There's going to be a thing called Wikipedia, and you're set.
Yeah, perfect. Well, maybe it's time for us all to give up, like zebrafish.
Oh no.
I have a story about what it takes to give up. Giving up is actually a very important thing for animals to be able to do, because at a certain point, animals need to know when to stop a behavior that's not working and stop needlessly depleting energy. To figure out what exactly in our brain makes us give up, a team of researchers put zebrafish in a laboratory experiment where they were in a virtual reality system swimming. They removed the visual feedback associated with movement to the fish. So to those fish in that moment, it appeared as if they were drifting backwards, regardless of how hard they swam. First, the fish thrashed harder and harder, and then they simply gave up. This is from Howard Hughes Medical Institute's Genelia Research Campus. And so to figure out exactly what neurons are responsible for the decision to quit, they watched zebrafish brain activity as they struggled. But their clearest signal wasn't coming from neurons at all. The cells that sprang into action just before zebrafish quit were glia, long thought to play a supporting role in the brain. So, glia, until about 2 decades ago, were thought to just provide support and insulation for neurons. Glia is from the Greek for glue. So, they really just thought it was brain glue. Recent research has begun to uncover new roles for glia in processing. In this research, they showed that zebrafish had one type of glial cell that calculated when an effort is futile. So their original hope was that they would find neurons driving this give up behavior, but instead they were able to identify specific glia, a glia called radial astrocytes. They're shaped kind of like a star, hence astrocytes. Those amped up in their activity in one part of the brain when the animals stopped trying to swim. Neurons were involved. Each time a movement attempt failed, certain neurons revved the astrocytes up, so they were connected kind of in symphony till at last they crossed a threshold and sent the quit command. But the glia were definitely the most active during that time. To tell the fish when to give up, the glia monitored movement attempts, noted repeated failures, and then set the quit message to the body. To verify their role, the researchers first used a laser to kill the only ones that consistently turned on when the fish gave up. In fact, fish who lacked those glial cells continued struggling to swim longer than the fish who still had astrocytes. Next, they created fish with astrocytes the team could control. Switching them on, the fish stopped swimming, even when the visual environment wasn't messing with them. While fish rarely pause, fish with overactive astrocytes spent over half their time languishing in defeat. Totally without hope. Taken together, these experiments confirmed the radial astrocytes control the decision to stop swimming. The next step for the group will be to study exactly how they communicate with neurons. Astrocytes can, for example, release chemical messengers that affect neuron behavior. One of their lead researchers says, astrocytes are like a Swiss Army knife. So they want to identify which of their many tools they deploy to halt unproductive struggle.
So are there similar features in the human brain? Like, would they be able to scan you and say, you're a quitter? We're going to cut some of these out so you'll be a winner.
Potentially, although that might kill you.
If it doesn't kill you, you'll be a winner.
Right. So I feel like, yeah, it's difficult to figure out exactly how much this has to do with just the normal function of life. Like if you push a door and it doesn't open, then you try to pull it. Is that not going to register suddenly? Are you just going to keep pushing the door?
The second option.
Well, I'm wondering if it also is related to things like clinical depression, where you're just always feeling kind of lost and like, it's not going to, because it would be super helpful to be able to diagnose that. And if there's a way to, maybe, suppress some of them, not all of them, but suppress some of them, help people get on a 2 feet situation.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so interesting. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, it definitely could have implications for human mental health if we figure out exactly what the astrocyte is up to. I mean, in general, since we've been kind of ignoring glia for almost 2 decades, and now all of a sudden we're starting to recognize how many different things they could be responsible for, there's all sorts of opportunities to look into that and see exactly what's going on in the brain. It's with all the brain stories that Kiki brings to the show on a regular basis, and she's our neuroscientist. It's very clear to me. It's more clear every week how little we understand how our brain works.
It is The ancient Egyptians used to think the human brain was there just to dissipate heat. And we've come a long way, but
Yeah.
it's a fascinating organ that's been much studied. But we're still trying to uncover the various aspects of it, especially when it comes to memory. At least my memory.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just electrical signals, but it's so much more than that, actually. So pretty interesting. Justin, did you find your bird bone story?
I did. This is a discovery in a Crimean cave, which is that little region in the north of the Black Sea. This is it's suggesting that early Europeans lived alongside some of the largest birds ever to exist. This research is published in the Journal of Vertebrate Paleontology. Previously thought that such giganticism amongst birds was kind of limited to islands: Madagascar, New Zealand, Australia. We now have a newly discovered specimen in this cave in the northern coast of the Black Sea. It is a bird as giant as the elephant bird or the New Zealand moa, and may have been a source of meat, bones, feathers, eggs, that sort of thing for early humans in the region. Quote voice from Dr. Nikita Zelenkov, or Russian Academy of Sciences. When I first felt the weight of the bird whose thigh bone I was holding in my hand, I thought it must be Malagasy elephant bird fossil, because no birds of this size have ever been reported from Europe. However, the structure of the bone unexpectedly told a different story. We don't have yet enough data to say whether it was most closely related to ostriches or other birds, but we estimate it weighed 450 kilograms, which, if you're not familiar with kilograms as a metric, 450 kilograms is approximately the equivalent of 450,000 grams.
Or 992 pounds.
Oh, or that, yeah. That's big. That's really big. Formidable weight is nearly double the largest moa, 3 times the largest living bird, common ostrich, and nearly as much as an adult polar bear. For reference. First time bird of this size has been reported anywhere in the northern hemisphere. Although the species was previously known, no one had ever tried to calculate the size of it. The flightless bird attributed to the species is probably at least 3.5 meters tall. Which what is that? What's 3.5 meters tall? We're talking 10 feet? Is that right? No,
like 20.
11 feet.
Oh,
That's
11 and a half.
Right,
It's
yeah.
11 and a half feet tall, 1,000 pounds ish.
Thing
Yeah.
weighs more than the original Volkswagen Beetle.
Yeah. So what's also kind of interesting about this is based on the femur that they have. So look at elephant birds, which was on an island, didn't have any predators, didn't need to run away from anything. It was that was the biggest thing on the island. They compared the femurs, and this current find is relatively long and slim in comparison, suggesting it may have been a better runner. It's actually more comparable to an ostrich, suggesting it may have had speed to get away from predators, which would have been necessary in the northern hemisphere and not so much on these island flightless birds that we've seen in the past. So other fossils discovered alongside this, there was a bison, for instance, date this to about 1.5 to 2 million years ago. So this is really before current modern humans were in this hemisphere. But there was other archaic humans around at the time.
Wow. That is really, I mean, ratites were everywhere. I love it. Just give me all the big flightless birds on all the continents. Want to see them all. They're amazing.
It's a meaty bird. Must have made one awesome, holiday feast.
If you could ever get anywhere near it, not get kicked.
I mean,
in the face.
the running isn't just to run away; it's probably chasing after something too.
Yeah.
Probably.
Oh, yeah, good point. Yeah.
I wonder how big their eggs were.
I wonder if they were probably ostrich-sized eggs. Those things are pretty chunky.
Yeah. So ostriches can get to be around 200, 250 pounds, and they're biggest. So if this thing is
3 times.
4 times
4
that
times.
weight,
Yeah.
then that means potentially, at least in thickness, that egg is going to have to be crazy thick.
Is that an ostrich egg behind you
Oh
on
yeah.
the shelf?
Mhm. Yeah.
So this is, if you don't mind, for those who are visually impaired at the moment, that egg is almost the size of Blair's head.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
And if I'm imagining this bird that's 4 times the size of the bird that
Yeah.
laid that.
Yeah, I'm
whew.
guessing the egg might have been that big.
Although with the weight and the height, I wonder how fast it could have run, because there is, as you get physically bigger, you're even with bird
Stride?
bones where it's hollow, is you got to be a little be careful, because that's a lot of weight to be carrying on 2 legs.
It is, but the stride
So-
also. That stride, if it's that much longer, these things add up pretty quick.
It takes
don't-
longer
and
to
you
get
don't-
going fast, but once you're going fast, your momentum is out of control.
And you don't need to spend energy as long to cover as much ground too. That's another aspect of it.
Well,
right?
that's the other thing. I'm wondering if the size is the way it was due to the climate, right? Larger
Yes.
animals tend to lose less heat for every
Yeah.
calorie that they burn than a
Mhm.
comparatively small, like a shrew. That's why elephants are so big. Woolly mammoths and stuff. So I wonder if that might have played a part. It's just very
Wow.
fascinating. Large birds. If they're any larger, you could ride them like horses. No, you couldn't.
If they would let you. Yes.
If they would let you, would have to
absolutely.
be a jockey, because they would be pretty annoyed.
They would never let you do that. Kicked right in the face. Roger, did you bring any more stories?
I had one on the narwhal beluga
Oh,
hybrid.
yes.
But I knew animals were kind of your thing, so I didn't want to be a jerk.
No, please. We can
Be
talk
a
about
jerk,
it
Roger.
together.
We've heard all the stories about you.
Animals are for everyone, is the thing. That's why I love talking about them.
That's great. That's like the perfect line to a Sesame Street song.
So it's actually okay. So now I need to know this story, because I had not heard any whiff of this. Which one of the things we covered just recently was about how narwhals were a kind
Narwhals?
of the narwhal was it's sort of a unicorn amongst all life, in that it has a very conserved non-diverse gene pool for a extremely long time, which is usually a sign that a species is about to be on the way out, but have survived and thrived without diversity over really long periods of time. So literally a unicorn amongst life. But to find out that they can have a hybrid event is then something very interesting to that story.
So this goes back to the late 1980s. An Inuit hunter named Jens Larsen killed a trio of very strange whales off the coast of western Greenland. Now, he kept the bones after they dismembered the animal and ate them and the rest. And it was more recently that they managed to analyze the DNA in the animal by a scientist named, I hope I can get his name right, Mads Peter Hyde Jorgensen. Studies marine mammals. In the 90s, he heard about it, and so he decided to I want to know if this is a new kind of whale or new species of whale, and extracted the DNA. And it turns out this animal is a narwhal beluga hybrid. Now, for anyone who's not familiar, narwhal is the whale with the big horn, which is actually their upper tooth that just grows through their head.
It's a tooth.
Imagine if your upper wisdom tooth grew through your head and you had a horn on it. That's what a narwhal is.
And then told everybody that you were a unicorn, because you're like.
And then the beluga whale is the famous kind of canary of the sea, the white whale, but not Moby Dick. It's a very chubby, almost Michelin Man-esque cetacean.
It has a big melon on the top of its
Big
head,
bulbous,
which is not actually a melon like a cantaloupe, but just a deposit of fat that helps them echolocate.
Yes, I'm very impressed. And what's interesting is that they did a DNA test, but they also did a dentition examination. And what they found was the animal kind of had a halfway between the teeth of a narwhal and a beluga. Narwhals, other than the big tusk and some vestigial teeth, don't actually have teeth, right? They kill and then they swallow like most animals or whales. And the beluga has a even number of teeth on top and the bottom. This animal kind of had 18 teeth on the upper bottom. Some of them were conically shaped, like a spiral horn on a narwhal, and others were shaped like a beluga. And what was interesting is the narwhal and belugas have some of their diet overlaps, but narwhal does a lot of bottom feeding with the horn. They dig up various animals off the bottom of the sea to eat, and belugas eat fish. So they were wondering how it ate, and because it apparently ate, because these animals lived for quite a long time. And it's very interesting because hybridization is something you normally encounter in land animals. For example, koi dogs, or what we were talking about earlier, the polar bear, grizzly, not Griswold,
Roller bear.
roller. I want to say Griswold, but that's from Vacation.
Mhm.
The family, or the infamous liger from Napoleon Dynamite, also a hybrid. And in each of these cases, all these hybrids are sterile because they're not compatible species. So they don't know if this was something that could have continued on, but they're also wondering if this also represents a diminishing or stressed population of animals, because they normally wouldn't interbreed. So what were the circumstances to cause this interbreeding in the first place? So lots of questions, but it's very, very fascinating. Generally, I like hybrid animals because it brings out the X-Files and everything. Like, everyone has a little cryptozoology in them.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, mother-in-law, things like that. And it's so cool and funky, but at the same time, it's real and scientific. So it's kind of has that, like, oh, but it's real, so it's cool. Like
and then there's an Inuit named Jens who recognized that he had an odd catch. Yeah, and it didn't know what to do with it. Kept the bones just so he could show off to that. No, really, it's a fish story, but I kept the bones so I can show all my other Inuit friends. No, I really caught something that was like this in between.
It's fascinating, and it's also the whole thing about crossing species has been part of human psychology for thousands of years. That's why we have sphinxes. That's why we got gods with the heads of eagles and various bodies. Because there's an aspect like, what if you could cross like the most ferocious animals on the planet, and then you have your horror story kind of thing. But it's also like, at what point can we do this through DNA splicing, where we could do it like, hey, let's create the perfect cow, or let's create the perfect pig, or the child, or something like that. So it's cool, it's freaky, it's neat, and it shows that life will find a way.
Well, and in terms of
nature does it already.
conservation, the fact that these two have interbred in the past means that if either of these marine mammals were in dire straits genetically, we talked about how the narwhals are so similar. If something came along like a disease that started to wipe all of the narwhals out, and we have found that beluga DNA has integrated in with narwhal DNA in the past, there's an opportunity to inject that population with some new DNA to save it. So you could do that synthetically, or if their babies are able to reproduce, if they have the same number of chromosomes and they match up correctly, then you could actually just do some selective interbreeding. So in the United States, for example, the Florida panther was almost extinct, and they were able to take regular mountain lions and breed a few of them into the Florida panther population to grow that population. So this is an opportunity to potentially use this to help save either of these species in the future.
And it's interesting, if they find more of these animals, it could lead to better understandings. Like, currently our taxonomy, I mean, it's kind of like, when you look at it, it's pretty rigid. Like, your species, it's a species. If you can't interbreed and have a fertile offspring, you're not on the same page here. But if it shows that over time that can change, that means our entire understanding of taxonomy and the way we classify animals and creatures will change as well, right? I mean, like, currently humans and our closest primate relatives, not going to happen, right?
Right.
On a whole number of levels. But genetically, it's not. It's going to produce, what do they call it? A chimera,
Uh-huh.
basically a non-functioning embryo. So it's if you could do this, that means there might be a chance for other related species, that are close enough for it to possibly use as you suggest.
And
Yeah, and this is an
we talk
aspect.
about the braided stream of
Yes.
humans, right? So
Mhm.
maybe there's a braided stream in other animals we don't know about. Is that what you were
Exactly.
going to say?
Yes, exactly.
Ah,
So this is an aspect of evolution that we often overlook. That these hybrid events. So you brought up a very interesting point of how did this creature feed? Was it a combination of the traits of both of its parents? And if so, that may have been a tremendous advantage. Which, if it really was a tremendous advantage, then we should have seen it persist. So probably wasn't. But there is an aspect of evolution of hybridizing between sort of disparate species that can possibly create things that go forward and are very productive,
mhm.
which is what humans are. Humans are one part evolution, sure, but a lot of hybridization events in human history. So why not in whales? Why not in a lot of those?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and who doesn't love whales?
And who doesn't love whales?
Because they're
Everybody loves them.
delicious. Oh,
And
whoops.
nutritious.
Oh no.
Mhm.
Oh no.
Oh,
Um,
Narreal is so yummy, though. It really is. It's really worth going
Hey,
to
Justin,
Greenland.
moving
Huh?
on. Moving on.
Oh, sorry.
Tell me your quick story for the end of the
Oh,
show.
yeah, I've got a quick story. This is really quick. Much of Europe currently, right now, as we speak, is experiencing a heat wave.
Oh.
Temperatures soaring over 40 degrees Celsius, which is triple-digit Fahrenheit. The extreme weather conditions are threatening the lives of tens of thousands of people who are unaccustomed to what we here in the Central Valley of California refer to as summer. It's really not that hot. It's not that bad. It's like 104. It's
Well,
totally
so
doable.
not only the poor Europeans who aren't used to it, but the plants is the thing. So it can mess up blooming cycles. It can
Yeah.
wake animals up at the wrong time
Yes.
of year. So here in San Francisco, for example, the summer for my whole life until a couple of years ago was the time of year that I wore a scarf and fingerless gloves to work zoo camp. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden, it's sunny, it's hot, I'm wearing short sleeves. And in San Francisco, usually those temperatures, the 80, 90 degrees, if we get them, would be in October, which means when you switch that, you have plants and animals thinking it's October. And then, whoops, it's cold again 2 weeks later. And so when these sorts of crazy things happen, there can be huge domino effects down the
Yes.
line ecologically.
There can. However, there is a silver lining in the region of Bordeaux in France, where wine producers are saying that the sudden burst of sun after the wet spring that they had will produce a superior vintage and an abundance of Bordeaux. So,
Well, great.
the ecology may be going to hell, but there'll be plenty of good wine to drink.
Yes, to drink our sorrows away. And something else that might happen from a different kind of inebriation. I have a real quick story about fungal hallucinogens and cicadas. Scientists have discovered new details on a fungus that compels its cicada host to mate long after their genitals have gone and their bodies have turned into what researcher colorfully describes as flying salt shakers of death. So this is a plant-associated amphetamine and a psychoactive chemical found in magic mushrooms put together in a pathogenic fungi that inside of the cicada, it was just 2 of less than 1,000 compounds found in these cicadas. It was enough to infect the cicada and make them flap their wings in a feminine manner, attracting males to stop for a snuggle. Unfortunately, their genitals have already fallen off, and so they don't stop snuggling up to one another, but instead spread these pieces of fungus to their friends around them, the fungus among us. So that, something quite grisly. The next step of this study is to dig into the fungal genome to see how they express themselves inside their hosts. But ultimately, if you want to know more about it, you can look into it yourself.
Oh my goodness.
It's really weird because this actually reminds me of a cult movie I remember seeing as a kid, with a very similar hook to it. It's called The Invasion of the Bee Girls. Came out in 1973.
Okay.
And the whole thing is these infected women would literally just have sex with men until they died. Like they would just die from exhaustion.
Sure, death by snoo. All right, so that I think is all. Did we do all our stories, everybody?
I think we did put a show together.
That's
I think we did
fantastic.
that.
We did it. First and foremost, thanks, Roger, for joining
Thank you.
us tonight. I hope you had fun.
I had fun.
chatting
I
with you
hope
tonight.
my daughter didn't freak anyone out.
Oh,
That's
no,
part of the
not
show.
at all. Where can people find you if they want to find out more about you and your shows?
So you can find Daily Tech News Show at dailytechnewsshow.com. And you can find me on Twitter at Jolly Roger, JOLLYROGER.
Fantastic. Also, thanks to FADA, Identity4, Gord McLeod, and everyone else in our chat room for making sure it is friendly and a fun space to be. And as always, shout outs to our Patreon supporters. Now, I do not have access to the amazing list that Kiki reads every week. So let me just say thank you to all of our Patreon supporters, but especially those that have pledged enough to a shout out on the show. Instead of hearing your actual name, you're just going to hear me instead saying, shout out to you. Thank you for your support.
Yeah.
Kiki can edit that in later if she desires. Thank you all for your support on Patreon. If you're interested in supporting us, finding out the different levels, you can find information at patreon.com/thisweekinscience. Also, remember that you can help us out simply by telling your friends about TWIS. On next week's show, we'll be talking with Dr. Suzanne Amari about her work using cadaver brains to understand obsessive compulsive disorder. Oh my God, I love talking about cadavers. I'm so excited. Once again, we will be broadcasting live online at 8 p.m. PST for that amazing interview. And you can find us on twis.org/live, where you can watch and join our chat room in real time. If you can't make it, though, don't worry. You can find our past episodes at youtube.com/thisweekinscience or simply twis.org.
Yeah, thank you for enjoying the show. TWIS is also available as a podcast. Just Google This Week in Science in your iTunes directory, and it should show right up. And also This Week in Science and any other Apple marketplacey thing. And we'll
honestly, just Google This Week in Science. You'll find what you need.
We're all over there.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, for more on those hallucinogens and the cicadas and the salt shaker of death, show notes will be available on our website. That's at www.twis.org, where you can also make comments and start conversations with the hosts or other listeners.
Or you can just contact us directly. Email Kirsten at thisweekinscience.com at gmail.com. Or Blair at BlairBaz@twis.org. Just be sure to put TWIS, TWIS, somewhere in the subject line. Otherwise, what will happen, Blair?
Spam filtered into oblivion.
Yes. You can also hit us up on the Twitter, where we are at TWIS Science, at Dr. Kiki, at JacksonFly, and at Blair's Menagerie. We love your feedback. If there is a topic you would like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, a haiku that comes to you in the night, please let us know.
We'll be back here next week, and we hope you'll join us again for more great science news.
And if you've learned anything from the show, remember,
it's all in your head.
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This week in science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth, and I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's this week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 I've got one disclaimer, and it shouldn't be news. That what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just get understand that we're not trying to threaten your philosophy. We're just trying to save the world from jeopardy. And this week in science is coming your way. So everybody listen to everything we say. And if you use our method instead of rolling a die, we may rid the world of toxoplasma gondii. 'Cause it's this week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 I've got a laundry list of items I want to address, from stopping global hunger to dredging Loch Ness. I'm trying to promote more rational thought, and I'll try to answer any question you've got. But how can I ever see the changes I seek when I can only set up shop 1 hour a week? This week in science is coming your way. You better just listen to what we say, and if you've learned anything from the words that we said, then please just remember it's all in your head. 'Cause it's this week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 This week in 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 science.
We did it. We did a show.
Yes.
We did. So we usually do a little bit of an after show. It's already pretty late and I'm pretty darn tired, so it's not going to be long, but we can chat and the chat room can talk to us and the people who are watching live can talk to us. So if you're into it, otherwise
Yeah, I
you're
can stay
welcome
a few
to.
minutes and then
Yeah.
you're based in San Francisco.
Yes.
Are you a local?
Yeah, I'm born and raised. Although I'm in
Awesome.
I'm in Daly City now. I had to move outside of city limits.
No, I'm San Francisco born and raised.
Oh, really?
I moved to the Central Valley after junior high. I went to Hoover.
Oh, you went to Hoover. Oh my god, that's great.
So it's weird because I sound excited because I know very few people left
Yes.
who are actually San Francisco locals. I have a handful of friends, but most of the people I meet are either transplants or they moved down or up from the state.
Whenever people meet me here and they find out that I'm from here, they call me a unicorn. I'm like, I know a bunch of them still. I hang out with them.
It's neat. Which high school did you go to?
I went to Lowell.
Oh, everyone goes to Lowell.
Yeah.
My sister went to Lowell.
There were pros and cons. Pros and cons. I felt like high school was harder than college. I don't know if that's a pro or a con, but
Yeah, that particular high school, man, that's
yeah.
that's one way to screw with your kids' heads.
Yeah, it definitely was tough. I had 8 hours of homework a night.
Yeah, I never understood the that weird it's kind of weird. It was like, I mean, for people who don't know, Lowell High School was kind of the college prep school that you wanted to send your kids to.
Yeah.
And you actually had to apply for it, right? You
Yes.
didn't automatically just get sent there. You had to apply.
So it was a public school. It's part of the public school system. It's not a charter school or anything like that, but you have to apply to get in.
And it's just so weird.
It's bizarre.
And yeah, it like all my cousins went, and I ended up going to high school in Modesto, but
Yeah.
it's a very fascinating thing. And now you're in Daly City, where
Yeah.
the bowling alley was when I was a kid.
Yes, Sarah Bowl, it's closed.
Sarah Bowl, there was Westlake Bowl, and then
Uh-huh.
they killed. Well, when Amoeba set up shop, they killed the one over in the Haight with the Rockin' Bowl.
Yeah. Yeah.
What a
yeah,
clock!
yeah.
You pay $20, you can bowl as many games as you want.
Well, now I don't know if you can tell what all these trophies are behind me, but they are in fact bowling trophies. So it's
Nice.
very apropos.
Wait, do you go
I-
to Sea Bowl?
No, I bowl at Presidio.
Oh yes,
Mm.
I've only been there once, and that was for a party, so I didn't do much bowling.
It's a great bowling alley. It's very
Oh,
fun.
the Presidio is the best part of the city.
It's pretty great. It's pretty neat. Untouched in many years by a lot of things.
But yeah, so it's weird. I mean, the city has changed and not changed. Since when?
Mostly changed.
Well, it's changed, but what's weird is if you've actually ever seen photos of San Francisco from the 20s and 30s,
Uh-huh.
a lot of the city looks the same because
Yeah.
San Francisco is very tight zoning laws. Now you have some, you have some landmark features like the Coronet Theater that I saw Star Wars in.
Yes.
and
So
Return
did
of the Jedi.
I. Aw.
That got crushed and turned into retirement homes or assisted living homes. And what was the one, Alexandria, the other one on Gary?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
that had a very ignominious end that turned into
It's a
YMCA,
YMCA. Yeah.
and then it got turned into. I saw a bunch of saw Roger Rabbit there in Dark City.
I saw Pee-wee's Big Adventure there.
I never saw that in the
great
theater,
movie.
Yeah.
That's such a fantastic movie.
It was great.
but I really miss it because it was a single screen theater. You went
Yeah.
in there, you only saw the one movie.
I love
but
the single screen theater. So
but it had all that ornate detail and architecture that was very, 30s and 40s. So very, it was not Rococo, but it was very Art Deco-y, but it was very done in a very flourishy manner.
yeah. I just loved going. Charles Abroad's asking where the Coronet was. It was on Geary. It was right near Mel's Drive-In. The thing I loved about going to the Coronet or any single screen theater is that it was such an experience. It was before, I remember even when Movie Phone happened and all of a sudden you were like, I can get tickets ahead of time. But when I saw the re-releases of all the Star Wars movies in the early 90s, it was before Movie Phone was even a thing. So you had to go line up for a couple hours to get your tickets, and then you got back in line to get into the movie theater and get a seat. And it was this whole experience. You were with all these people all day to see this experience together. And everyone was so amped up by the time the movie started. It was very fun.
Was that the first time you saw the movies?
No. I had seen
Oh,
them a bunch
okay.
of times before that, but it was the first time I saw them in theaters, which was very cool.
Yeah, it was having a bunch of people in a theater is kind of cool, even though if you sit out in the boonies, but there's a certain feeling in the air that you get. I remember when they re-released the movies with all the digital enhancements, which
Yeah.
a lot of people
Oof.
gripe about. But you had a long line, but everyone was super into it. Like instead of
Yeah.
having 12 showings of the same movie in a Metroplex where people are in and out, you still can kind of get that feeling. But now you have to go super early. You have to get the super late showing. You have to be the rest of everyone. This was just in the middle of the day, in the blind stretch on the block. Someone ruins the movie about Empire Strikes Back, and the twist at the end. It's like, what are you doing?
The twist.
But the school system there was always bizarre because
Yeah, it is very weird.
there's a lottery system to the way San Francisco's
Hmm.
high schools work. I don't know if it goes with all the. I don't remember it being for all the schools, but I definitely know it's a high school. It had nothing to do with how close you were to the high school, and you were put in a pile, and it was based on your parents' educational attainment. So the higher the higher your for example, if both your parents are PhDs, you're less likely to get into the school of your choice. And if you had, the whole idea was to give children from disadvantaged backgrounds first dibs in placement.
Level the playing field. Yeah.
So there's positives and negatives to that, and I get in trouble when I talk about this a little bit. I started out my schooling in a school district that may not have had a PhD parent in the school, and then I moved to a town where most of the parents likely had a PhD, at least one, if not both. And I went from being a straight A student to a solid D student, like that. And part of it was because the school district moves along at a much quicker pace because they're teaching to the sort of average of the class. And the average of the class with a predominant number of PhD students moves along quicker. I think the quality of the education is better in that scenario. Despite the fact that I became a D student and basically failed out of school as a result of having transferred this way, I do appreciate how this school system works when you have all of that support at home. So I don't know that it's necessarily beneficial to the students to do this leveling of the playing field when you could have an accelerated education available. So it's a really tricky thing because you want to lift all boats, but at the same time, you don't also at the same time want to be sinking them. So it's a very hard thing to grapple as a society, how you manage both of those. I think my solution ultimately to feel better about believing that a segregated school system on education actually works in the favor of the students is to say that the solution is to get more people into higher education in the first place so that their children will be accelerated through school.
Ultimately, what you're talking about is a more personalized learning system, which is what is generally understood to be the best methodology. The problem is we don't have money for it. If you have smaller class sizes, if you have more teachers per classroom, however you can personalize the learning experience for each student, because each brain is different and develops at different rates and works in different ways, the better. But that is a very expensive prospect. And unfortunately, our country is not very good at funding school.
Right, but what I'm saying is actually is not quite that. Which is what I'm saying is that there's definitely a massive affect of the parental level of education that does affect, because the parents are academically aware and encouraging and reinforcing and teaching at home things that they have learned that the other parents may not have prioritized, and by segregating students based on the parental education will accelerate those children to greater levels of education quicker and won't be held back and won't get bored. It's a very hard thing. And I get why they would do the lottery system. I get the idea of giving access, but it's not, you could take the most underfunded school district in the nation, and if it has a high per capita of PhD parents, they'll be fine.
But part of that is because of something called homework, which is part of this larger conversation of should children be given homework from kindergarten, you know? And the less you can send work home with the children, the less you will have inequity in expectations and abilities based on who's at home helping.
Yes.
Which is a big part of the problem.
So and this is the thing. I went to the school district that had no PhD parents. And I was a straight A student because I showed up in the 3rd grade with the ability to read.
Mhm.
Okay. That was all it took by 3rd grade to be able to read. If you're not reading in kindergarten in this other school, though, you have fallen behind. But that's what I'm kind of trying to express is that if you are the kid who could read in the 1st grade or 2nd grade, and none of your classmates can, they're not going to be teaching you additional reading skills. You're not going to be progressing. So this is a very class, or it falls into a lot of categories of class. It can fall then quickly into race. It can follow into a lot of categories. The solution, obviously, is giving access to higher education to people who would not necessarily be able to have gotten it in the first place, because their next generation will be on that more accelerated path as well.
And maybe we need to rethink the way schools operate, with the grade levels that we do. I mean, it's a holdover from like the turn of the 20th century. I mean, before then, it was not uncommon to group children of different ages into the same classroom and teach them the same subject.
Right, and which at least one of my children got to experience through a Montessori type school system, and it worked amazingly well. Because the kids feed off each other and they learn from the older kids quicker than they learn from the teacher, which is an incredible thing to witness. But there is so then if you come from the disadvantaged school, then maybe K through 12 doesn't do it. Maybe it's K through 14. Is that what you're kind of indicating?
Well, I'm just wondering, like, do we need those gradations, or do we just have, okay, you're at this level, you're going to be grouped in with a bunch of other kids? And I think part of it is just like we have these grades. We have 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade. I mean, a lot of it is just like, we understand better how children learn in different environments. And, we haven't really changed or altered too much of the way a lot of school districts operate, which is unfortunate.
Well, I will take back from a second from what you're saying, in that we had a revolution in education at the turn of the last century with John Dewey, who before then we were doing rote teaching, memorize this, repeat it back. That was it. And he said, no, we actually have to get student involvement. We have to have them doing their homework, doing the research, participating in the learning experience. Totally revolutionized education. We invented everything we invented. And then at some point, a dozen years ago, we decided, no, we need to teach to a test where they remember stuff and spit it back at us so we can rank schools and teachers and deploy funding based on this. We actually have been going the wrong direction with a lot of education, and the results are we are failing and key leading subjects comparatively to other countries across the world.
And it's that's one of the failures of understanding education, is that we see numbers and we need to, our numbers need to be at this level. And it's not to say that there aren't problematic teachers, that we need, kids need to know a certain competency in literacy, numeracy, and the rest. But at the same time, it's, it's not assembling, a car or something. You just can't put parts together and expect it to work time and again. It's the other thing is teachers are super undervalued.
Oh yeah.
It's just not even funny.
Undervalued, undersupported, undertrained, all of it.
Underpaid.
Yeah, they don't often get professional development for free. They pay out of their own pockets for professional development.
And the biggest cost in education isn't the teachers, it's the bureaucracy. Like, I remember my parents run a restaurant. There was this teaching association, like they had this huge dinner, they occupied half the restaurant. I was asked, just like, oh, what class do you teach? We don't teach, we work in the office. We run, and it's not, bureaucracy is necessary, but it's an odd thing that we have such a, we're so wedded to how things look instead of actually how they function. Like, we need to be seen giving money. And it's not that schools don't need money, but they just kind of throw money and expect things to happen,
Mhm.
right? And that's not how, right? You don't throw seeds on the ground and expect a crop of corn to come up in 3 months, right? There's a bunch of work you need to do.
And we
And-
offset the benefits of fundraising by refusing to give funds to schools. This is the story of the California lottery. The whole reason that we got statewide gambling, state-sponsored gambling in the state of California was that the funds were going to the schools. So as soon as those funds started to arrive, what did they do? They reduced the amount of taxes that went to fund the schools. So there's no benefit.
No.
whatsoever.
It was literally I mean, you could tell. Like
Yeah.
the fact that they stressed education lottery.
Yeah.
You know, when I went to high school, my Spanish teacher's like, "You see this map? This is what the lottery paid for. That's it. Everything else in this building's from 1956.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you got a boiler that heats the school in the middle of the summer because it's too expensive to turn it off because it's from 1956.
Yep. Oh, I
So-
remember stuff like that. Yeah, and there was one hallway when I went to school where there was insulation exposed, and you're like, I hope that's not asbestos, but based on what I know about this school and the timeline, probably asbestos.
I mean, you had Channing Hall, so you had some celebrities. Annette Bening, I think, was the other one.
Oh gosh, what was his name?
Robin Williams.
No, not Robin Williams. The guy from Miss Congeniality. What's his name? Benjamin Bratt. Yeah.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
He did
went to
that other
Lowell.
San Francisco movie, The Mission.
Oh
Not
yeah.
Mission.
Yeah.
Oh, it's almost 10:30. I need to jet. But
I
thank
think
you
it's
guys
time
so
for
much
all
for
of us
being on
to
the
go.
show. It was so much fun.
Thanks so much for coming
the way
on.
we normally end the show, it would be something along the lines of say goodnight, Roger.
Good night.
Say goodnight, Blair.
Good night, Blair. Say good night, Justin.
Good night, Justin.
All right. Good night, everybody. Stopping the broad.